These have been tearing up matches in deep water throughout this summer. Let's find out a little more about the slow sinker and how to use it. So guys, welcome back to Matchfishing TV UK. Today we're going to go through a method which divides opinion. It's a bit of a Marmite one. So the slow sinker. And it has been absolutely devastating in certain venues across the country. And venues that are more than 8 feet in depth, it allows you to slowly present your bait, going through the levels, attracting carp. And it very much is an exciting method, but it's one that you have to know really the science behind before you just fling stuff out and get on with it. So today I'm going to go through some different types of slow sinker that you can use and some things that you can do if you don't have access to some slow sinkers, because you can use what you already have to recreate that bait falling through the water. So here's what we need for today's demo. We need a nice big water vessel, if you like. In this case I've got a vase. This is the same vase that I use when I'm shotting pole floats. It just will allow us to see how firstly the pellets fall through the water and get a gauge on sort of timings, and then we can do the same with the slow sinkers and pellet waggler overshotted. The second thing we're going to need, obviously, if you've got some, is some of these. So some slow sinking bombs, and we'll weight those up correctly. The third thing, obviously, some pellet wagglers, if that's the way that you want to approach this. I've just got a bag of 8mm pellets here, so I'm going to use a couple of those to try and gauge how quickly they fall through the water. And we need some split shot to overshot our pellet wagglers. The other thing that we will also need is our hook of choice when we're going to fish this, because we want to put on a hook to the pellet to gauge the fall when they're both on, because if we just did the pellet we'd be missing a bit of weight with the hook as well. So let's crack on. So first things first, I've got two different types of slow sinker here. I've got a sort of teardrop shaped one, and bear in mind slow sinkers are generally sort of bubble floats that the carp anglers use, which are kind of overweighted to allow them to sink, because in normal circumstances a carp angler would grab this, sort of fill it halfway with water to get the casting weight, fling it out, and it will just sit on the top like that. We want to create an overweight effect so that it goes out, it sits, and then it just slowly starts to fall through the levels. So we've got this sort of teardrop shape, and I've also got one of these corum ones as well. Now the reason that I've got the corum one is I saw it in the shop and I thought that will work. To be honest, it's very similar to what I know a few other guys use, but also it will hold quite a bit of water, which will give us quite a bit more casting weight. And I'll go through that in a bit, because when it is full and you're happy, it's always a useful thing to know what the weight of the thing actually is, so that when you're approaching your peg and you want to cast somewhere, you can pick the suitable slinker to do the job for you. Right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to fill these up with some water. Now these ones are rather clever. They've got a silicone tube running through the middle of them, and actually when you pull it, it opens up a gap at the end, and this is where you put your water in. Now as I say, a carp angler would probably fill it halfway, 3/4 of the way, and it's going to stay on the top. It's going to be buoyant, there's going to be enough air in it to keep it up there, but we want it going down. So we're going to fill it fully, and we're going to test how long it takes to sink. Now it's always good if you've got something like a syringe. In this case I've just got an old recycled bottle here that's got quite a handy little fine nozzle on the end of it. It just allows you to be quite precise when you're filling it up. So I'll stop it there. So what we've got is, we've got, as you can see, about 3/4 of the way full. Let's test that. So coming straight back to the top, that's not what we want. We're not surface fishing for carp. We want to be sinking through the level. So I'll continue to put some weight in. Weight being water. Okay, so you can see we're almost at the top there, just a slight bubble. Let's have a go with that. So it sinks, but it sank really, really quickly. Got my specialist tool here. So let's get that one out. Okay, so we know that's the level that is definitely sinking. Now, the important thing to know with all of this is how quickly a pellet actually will sink. So I've got my pellets of choice here. They're 8mm pellets. This is what I'm going to be using with the sinker. So let's quickly plop one in. Do another one. Okay, so we want to be mirroring that kind of sink rate. And at the moment, as you can see, it's a bit quick. So if we can, we want to take a bit of water out. And again, this is where, if you've got this sort of little pipette thing, quite handy, because you can just do the little sucker there. Take a little bit out. Right, let's try that. Now I'd say that's probably just about right, because you can see it's sinking. So if I leave it on the surface, so that should be sat on the bottom. Yep, and it's sunk slowly. Now what I can do is grab another one of my pellets. Let's just test the two side by side. Okay, I'd say that's pretty close, so I'm not going to mess around with that too much. And that is the theory for all of this type of float. So whether it be one of these teardrop ones, or whether it be one of these sort of corum ones, a bit more of a beast, that's what they do. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the same logic to a pellet waggler. So here I've got a loaded pellet waggler, 7 grams, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of line. Not going to muck around too much. I'm going to stick the bit of line through. Now this is a loaded one, so it shouldn't need anything. In fact, before I do that, just to demonstrate that it is a loaded waggler. There we go, so that's sitting on the top nicely. So I can apply the same logic here by simply putting a bit of line through the swivel. I'm going to go straight for a couple of BBs. Now this will be far too much, I'm sure. So I've stuck a couple of BBs on to the loaded waggler. Now I'm pretty sure this is going to be far too quick a sink, but let's give it a try. Wow, okay. Do a couple more BBs and see if we can overshot it correctly to match that sink rate. Okay, so now we're at 4. That should go down. Okay, it's not too bad, but let's check it against an actual pellet. Let's test it against a fresh pellet as it would hit the water. Now I think that's far too fast. So I'm going to have a go with 3 BBs. See where that gets us. Okay, so 3 BBs. So again, we'll step it down, just as if you're shot on a float normally, but looking now to overload it. So stick a number 1 on. So 3 BBs and a number 1. Well, that definitely went down a bit slower. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So that's how you overshot pellet waggler to do exactly the same thing. Obviously, I think the presentation's slightly better if you are doing it with a slow sinker. It's in line. I think you can have a nice sort of neat tidy rig. It's probably a bit easier to cast as well. However, if you don't have access to that, then that's a perfectly viable option. Now, the last thing I discussed, so you can go and test all your gear and you can make sure that, you know, it's dropping as it should, it's mirroring the pellets as closely as possible. The last thing I do is I grab a set of scales and I'll zero them. And when I'm happy with the amount of water I've got in it, I'll just plop it on. Okay, so 7/8 of an ounce, 26 grams. So, you know, about an ounce there or thereabouts. So that's going to cast decently. Just double check it still sinks as well. Lovely job. Okay, so that's how you do it. As I said before, I've just dropped the pellets in. What I would do if I were you is I would get your hook of choice with a band, just put it on to the pellet. Don't worry about putting main line on, etc. And when you drop it, do it with that. But look, it's like anything when you're shotting a pole rig, etc. You know, if you put a little bit of time in before you're actually going to do the thing that you want to do, then you're probably going to get a better outcome. That's just a little bit about the slow sinker. The theory is, to recap, that this and this should be going at the same rate or as close as you can get to match you catapulting out 3 or 4 pellets at a time. You're really trying to trick the carp mainly into intercepting your bait as it falls. In terms of rod choice and reel choice, well, there's no real hard and fast rule to this, to be honest. I use a pellet waggler rod because you're not watching the tip. The takes are absolutely brutal. So you need to hold your rod for one. Cast out, make sure you feather the cast nicely so you get the soft landing. Don't tighten your line. Don't tighten your line, just put your rod down, hold onto your rod, and you will know when you've got a bite because the rod will basically be torn out of your hands. You can watch the line, you can watch the tip, but in my experience, you know, I've caught quite a few carp on this method now. You'll know when you've got a carp on for sure. In terms of a reel and main lines, you know, I would normally go with an 8-pound main line. I use Daiwa sensor, but whatever your choice is, and a hook length of no less than 6 pounds, because as I say, the takes are brutal. You're going to be into fish straight away, and you're going to need to get control of them straight away. So that's all from Matchfishing TV today. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully it's quite instructional for you. If there's anything else like this that you'd like to see, if I don't know, I'll find a more qualified, more experienced angler that does, which means most of the world. But for now, enjoy your fishing and see you on the next one.